Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining from. Thanks, everybody, for joining this session on achieving regulatory excellence, this LinkedIn Live session. Just a quick couple of housekeeping comments before we start. There is a comment section where if you do have any questions that come up in your mind as we go through the presentation or this discussion, rather, please put them in the comments. We will try to address as many as we can at the end of the session. Otherwise, we will get back to you later on as well. So with that, just wanted to introduce our guest speaker. Very excited to have Dr. Benita von Glahn join us from Merz Therapeutics. Dr. Benita is a pharmacist with a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry, with 25 years in regulatory affairs experience from a number of different organizations, starting with Mundi Pharma in German reg affairs, with Abbott and AbbVie in global regulatory affairs, in immunology, with various increasing leadership roles there. At Boehringer Ingelheim in global reg affairs, leading at first the biosimilar development team, then in addition the immunology team, and for the last 4 years the global regulatory organization as well. Since July of this year, though, Dr. Benita has been with Merz Therapeutics as the head of global regulatory affairs, and is a member of the R&D Executive Leadership Team. So just wanted to welcome Dr. Benita, say thank you very much for joining us today. Hope everything's going well there. I just wanted to maybe start just asking as an intro, maybe from your perspective on the topic, why has this topic of regulatory excellence become more and more important today?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, but also the kind words at the beginning. Yeah, this is a topic which really, really is close to my heart, given the experience I have made in my career so far, that topics like faster approvals will really, really drive us in view of being excellent as a regulatory organization to enable products reaching the patients much, much more quickly. And that's why regulatory excellence is really, really important.
Excellent. Thank you. Given those demands from the broader organization, what does it mean for the structure of a global regulatory department?
Yeah, so what does it mean is really that we need to see different features in the organization. And I'm sorry, just give me 1 sec, because I'm not seeing on the screen what you probably see on the screen. So, but anyway, we can help that out. So anyway, what is important in view of the structural consideration is really having the global oversight. And what does it mean? So in an organization which is really, really large, you cannot ask for every, let me say, single topic on a specific product a different person. So you want to know, is there the one go-to person for product project, who really has the oversight of that? And really is the contact not only for me as a head of the department, but also for all cross-functional activities in the department. So from that perspective, the global oversight is really important. And that's also leading later on to some discussion, who can really do that, right? Secondly, we know when we have a global business, it's important to think about how do we best liaise with the countries. Because yes, in the corporate organization, we usually have the experience on certain bigger regions, but not necessarily all the details in the bigger regions, where we know what is the latest requirements versus latest developments, but also all the different small countries which have their own regulations and so on. So making sure we in corporate understand the local needs, but also making sure that the countries understand where the product and project strategy is going, and if this really makes sense. So have that interaction with the region. The other important thing is to have the expert knowledge in the organization. So, product development is not just clinical studies. It's also CMC development. It's how the label looks like and so on. And also having regulatory intelligence. As I said, how can we streamline in a corporate organization and collect what are the requirements in the different countries so that everybody in the organization has a go-to tool where those information can be captured. So that's from the clear roles and responsibilities. Also, and I know the audience here is most likely interested or coming more from the Reg Ops part of the regulatory world, it's important to have a structured support system in view of, do I have a state-of-the-art regulatory information management? Thank you. Regulatory information management system. So where I can easily find where my product is approved, where my product has certain manufacturers approved, but perfectly also better even in the development, right? Where did I filed already a clinical trial application? What kind of feedback did I get? So if I have this all structured and easily to go to, I think it's much more easier to have an overview, to find information, and also link it back. Perfectly a central place for budget planning and tracking. And why do I have this here? Because we all have coming new projects in, projects die, another thing is brought in. So in a big organization, you really want to understand how much headcounts do I need to support the work, how much money do I have. In a perfect world, I do really have like a tool where I know, like for a phase 3 document for a global person, I would need 0.7 or 0.8 FTE in that year, and maybe for regional support 1.2, because there are a lot of regional activities. And having that tool and that calculation centrally, that makes it much more easier to have also the planning for the department and avoid, hopefully, some bottlenecks in view of resources and so on. Also, it's important to have an overview who from the external world is supporting the organization, why, for how long. So if you have that structured nicely, and we know that the electronic world is developing, I think it's easier for the majority and definitely the management to find this information and plan ahead. What is important to me, especially in larger organizations, is really how do we share experiences across different, maybe therapeutic areas, maybe different groups. Because at the end of the day, an agency or the public domain sees only the company. They don't see company XYZ in oncology or XYZ in CNS. So it's important that the company is outside and also internally, they see the department as one unit. So how do you achieve this? So you can do this in multiple things. Of course, information sharing sessions. But what, for me, the most valuable sessions were is when we discussed cross-functionally regulatory strategies. So that even a TA oncology is looking into an immunology strategy and challenging questions. Because you may recall, we are all strive for faster approvals, accelerated timelines, and so we can learn from each other. So those kind of governance structures and exchanges should be standard in an organization to really be a learning organization and have that enabled how the department works together.
Thanks, Benita. I mean, beyond the structural features that you've spoken about within a regulatory organization, what about the actual people working in the department? Are there, obviously, what specific skills are key in your mind?
Absolutely, there are skills needed. And of course, everybody would think about, oh, there is, the need for understanding the regulatory framework. And that's a, let me say, basis. However, it's important that to have those persons in the department have additional features. So for instance, very structured, because we all know regulatory work is a lot about project management, timeline management, managing timelines from the agency, managing within the company, development of responses, managing all of this. So as a key skill, it's important to be structured as a person or use structured tools. Communication. Without excellent communication, I think it gets more and more difficult. It's important to convey quickly the key information to the required stakeholders and people who give input, but also outside the organization, convey to the agencies, right? What is the development plan? What is the current situation? Sometimes it's easy because it's a lot of scientific knowledge around this, where you can say it's a scientific discussion. There are other cases where there is not really a path, and you want to really make sure the company's position is clearly articulated, and you really give the reasons and make it easy for the agencies, verbally and in writing, what the company's strategy is. Also, the people should be scientifically driven. Yes, regulatory people need to and tend to, cite a lot of guidelines and so on. On the other hand, I think a good regulatory skill is when you can combine what is written in the guidances and what is the latest science, and where we can merge this together in the interest of patients, really to develop faster solutions. Also looking at this from the business point of view, because we all live in a business, we all live for patients, and we need to make sure, yes, we can always do 150% ready dossiers, but will it help the patient? Will it help the business? Probably not. And that needs to be taken into account when strategies are developed, which I'm not saying. What I'm not saying is have low quality or not enough data for this, but have scientifically driven and business driven good strategies. And that's why people in regulatory should be creative thinkers, really thinking about what is really regulated, what is not regulated, and is there, let me say, a gray field which, combined with science, I can develop a good strategy and be pass the red face test in front of agencies, but also the public at the end, that I really have developed a very good product at the end of the day. And that accounts also for smart risk taking, making sure, yes, with those strategies there could be risk, but on the other hand, if you are openly convey internally as well as externally where the risks are, and also how you can address those risks, either with further data collection and so on, then that should be perfectly there. And that's why it's important to be able to challenge and develop alternative options. I hope, Paul, that addresses some of the points.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Benita. Maybe before we could even go to some questions from the audience in a moment as well. So perhaps we can move on to that shortly as well. But maybe as we do that, and for everybody online, if you do have any questions, if you could, as I say, if you can put them in the comment section. Maybe just a quick one for me. Is there, though, obviously you have organizations joining this call of various different sizes as well. Is there really a one-size-fits-all solution for any size regulatory organization? I mean, we have everything from companies of tens of thousands to those in the hundreds. Are there kind of key differences between those?
Yeah, very, very good question. And of course, for bigger companies, you could say it's a one-fits-all approach, right? Because you have the certain features you need to direct them. However, each company is different. Do you really have a fully global reach? Do you focus on a certain region? It's dependent on the breadth of the portfolio, if you work with a lot of distribution partners and so on. So I think it's important that certain features are captured, like I presented, like the global oversight, the reach into the countries, and also the communication to the countries. But how you build then the structure is very company dependent. It's also dependent on where the regulatory organization sits in the organization. So, and as we all know, there are different models. You might sit in medical, you might sit in R&D, it might be even, in par with R&D. So there are different function, and with that drives the very individual decision how you structure your department.
Very good. And kind of touching on that as well, I mean, in terms of organizations with different therapeutic areas, are there differences there as well? I mean, how do different functions in therapeutic areas, if you like?
So especially when you have like 3 or 4 different therapeutic areas, you might want to make sure that, for instance, the people in those therapeutic areas are very closely aligned, and then have the exchange with the other TAs, which is a structural thing. If you mix it up, then you lose potentially the scientific knowledge exchange, which you can have more easily within a TA, right? And I know we all think still in hierarchical structure, and if in a perfect world the matrix organization would really work, right, it would not matter, but that's not the reality. So that's why you always need to look like, where is the biggest gain of information exchange, and put those teams or these people in one team.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you touched on it already on the regulatory operations side in particular. I know you've kind of already touched on it a little bit. I don't know if, while we're kind of just waiting for any other comments from the attendees, do you have any other specific kind of comments, either from the skills side or just the general structure of the organization, just from the reg ops side specifically?
Very good question. So based on my experience, and I had this one situation a very few years ago, where somebody from regulatory operations was more interested in how is actually the EU submission done, what needs to happen, and why. And why I'm saying this is what we saw after that intensive exchange of that person with different departments. She came up with some great ideas how we can better prepare for the reg ops part of the submission, right? So much earlier, and could turn the submission much faster around. So what does this mean for skills? It means, beyond all what I said before, is that interest in beyond my own responsibility, to really look at other features in the organization to better understand this, and to build based on that understanding a much better plan. So really exchanging knowledge, and have the willingness for that.
Question did come in from Divya asking about analytical skills in particular. Is that, you see that as being a must for somebody in regulatory?
So, and analytical skills could be really something very different. So I think you can be very analytically on the, let me say, tactical European or country specific endeavor. Yeah, it's because you analyze how best to do it. And I think everybody is somehow a strategic thinker and looks at this analytically. I think it's just the scope different if you have like the global oversight of a development product. There, the analytical skill runs more in the scientific arena, whereby an analytical skill in view of managing 10, 15 countries at once, or at least the demands of 10, 15 countries at once, there you analyze as well, and think about like, what is the priority, and where do I need to agree the priority with, and so on. So I think there is an analytics around that as well. I hope that addresses the question somewhat.
Okay, thank you. Maybe another quick one for myself as well. I don't know if you've seen any differences. Obviously, a lot of things changed kind of globally after COVID and various other kind of global impact, or more regional things like Brexit. Do you see any kind of impact or changes to what you're saying now to what you might have said maybe 4 or 5 years ago, for example?
I think what I have personally experienced, right? And then we were basically rushing over the first slide because I couldn't see it here on the screen. But anyway, is that push for, can we accelerate our timeline more? Because we have seen it with the vaccines, and what can we do to apply the same as, BioNTech has done it and Moderna has done it, right? What can we learn from this? And that was a new feature, not necessarily new in view of being fast, but it got another push during the COVID pandemic. And also the other thing, what we have seen is that there was much more openness in view of where globally electronic documents are accepted versus where you had for some countries a lot of, let me say, paperwork stamps, right? The more stamps you had on it, the better was it for some countries. At least we have seen a trend that electronically signed documents are more accepted than before. And with that, the only thing, and maybe triggered by COVID, is the learning not to accept like something like, oh, I have seen that 15 years ago and this is how it works, right? So always start to check in, is this still the situation? Can we challenge the status quo? And there are other examples, if I may, right? So for instance, historical control database, and I know this is not necessarily RegOps topic, but when we discussed this with FDA like 18 years ago, there were a lot of requirements. And because of the uncertainty of the situation for an agency. So now I think they have a much more clear requirement, let me say, schedule in view of when an external or an historical control database can be accepted by them. So it's a different discussion. So I think continue to be open-minded, even if you are like 20 plus years in the regulatory business and feel you have seen a lot. I think that is also a learning, given COVID, the drive which was in there, but also all the other tools which are changing.
Thank you. There was one comment, maybe while I'm asking this question, I could maybe ask Alp to bring up, because I know there was a visual that you had at the beginning that didn't come up. If it's possible, I'd ask Alp to bring that up just in case there's anything, any other comments there that you'd like to make. But there was a question that came in as relatively general again in terms of the framework. What are the framework for starting a regulatory domain company other than manufacturers? So I think it's a broad question. I don't know if there's something you can touch on a little bit, but it might be hard to cover. It's almost a separate session in a way.
And it might, let me take my flavor on that, right? So I could see this, and I think we all have seen this in one or the other occasion in the past, where the regulatory department in the past, and maybe was basically used, oh, they are the ones sending the documents into the agency. So you could in bad terms say, oh, that's the post office, right? So do you really want to be seen as a post office? No. and that's why I put down on that slide, like, push the boundaries, right? Show that, there's one thing I know, right, is like, what is the regulatory framework? And I need to be very founded on that. But also show the organization where are maybe wiggle rooms where I can even push a bit more, and not just say, oh, here are the requirements and I want to have all these documents and that's the list. And I think if you change that behavior as an organization, or as at least some people of the organization, to open up options, you are more seen as an asset in the organization than, let me say, a service provider. We all provide service. Each department is providing service, but is it more a strategic service? And a lot of companies have seen this, meanwhile, that regulatory is a very strategic partner in the organization. Some may not, but it would help things like, can we look at pushing the boundaries? Do we look for options for a competitive label compared to comparators, being faster if there's a possibility? being able to know, right, what are the developments in the regulatory agencies, and be not even not ahead, but at least very close to the feed when something is coming, and have a system there, and be proactive. Be just proactive to communicate this out in the organization, so that they really have the feeling, okay, that department has it under control, and we can basically rely on them if we have questions, not only to hear what the requirement is, but also how we can address it. And, they are thinking with us. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe one last question before we're probably going to be out of time here anyway. There's been quite a few questions coming in. There was one from Fatan Azuni. As a global leader, how do you address big commercial decisions that have different and major or significant impacts on reg affairs activities and product licenses in local countries?
Mm-hmm. So based on at least my corporate life, and I had the luxury, at least working in teams where the commercial decisions were not made as standalone decision. Did it for some things happen? Yes, but the major decisions were really discussed with the team and with the different functions. However, sometimes it's the other way around, right? So you need to introduce a change which might impact the commercial, let me say, ability or the wish to promote certain statements. And then I think the best option for me was always to say, look, there's something coming. We try to address this, but let's be open about that. And I think this is where, at least when you have the trust in the organization, people talk to you. So is this like happening overnight? Please trust me now. You all know this takes a while, and it requires some actions that people trust you, that you are willing to discuss with them, right? So I know it's a bit circling around, but it really helps if in a company you have a structure where you have an exchange between the different functions and not standalone decision making.
Thank you. Maybe just to close, there was a question just in terms of, when would you know you have regulatory excellence? Are there signs or ways of measuring it to say, yep, okay, now we're excellent. We have regulatory, we've achieved it. Is there some way of measuring that as such?
Yeah, right. It would be great to measure it, but I think a very good sign is if the organization is developing in that right direction is when the feedback from functions like commercial, manufacturing, also development is coming back, or they are really a good strategic partner and they help us drive the product forward, right? And you are not seen in the organization, those paper pushers, and they really want to have like hundreds of documents, and we really question if this is there. So I think when you move from this later situation into what I described first, like trusted partner thing, that's a sign. It's hard to measure. Yeah. And is it ever enough? Probably not. And there's a German saying, and while I was prepping, I was thinking how I can translate this, but there's a German saying where you say, when you want to achieve the highest height, right, you will at least achieve a high height, right? So if you strive for more, you will grow, basically. And I think this is what we should keep in the back of our mind.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Benita. I want to thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Hope everybody found the session interesting. This session is basically by default recorded, so is available for people to look at and add further comments afterwards. If anybody shares the link, etc., it is basically within minutes of this session ending, will be available for other people to look at, review, and comment on. So I want to thank everybody for their time. Thanks again, Dr. Benita, and have a good day, afternoon, evening to everybody. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.